Hey everybody, I wanted to do a quick chess video, and it's an endgame, but primarily it's about, I want to impart to you what I think is the road to improvement, my humble opinion. Because I've, I've interacted with a lot of really strong players, and I've been working a lot on improvement, and I really think that chess is actually much more similar to language, to thought, normal thought than we think. Let me explain what I mean. That was kind of a weird way to put it, but imagine for a second that you couldn't think in language. You didn't know any language. That you had to think without language. I think you'll agree that the level of thought, the complexity of your thoughts would be very limited. You might think at the level of a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old because language allows us to add to concepts, to sort of, build them and make them more complex. And chess is the same way actually. Knowledge of strategy, of positions, of endgames allows the high level player to think in language when he and make very deep moves without as much effort as you might think. So let's look at this position. An amateur here would look at this position and say, "Well, I'm a pawn up, but it's white's turn to move. How do I win this?" And he would just start brute force calculating all these variations. And I'm pretty positive that 99% of people that were low level would never find the answer to this. By contrast, high level players would find the answer to this very easily. And it's not because they're so much smarter, because they're not really. It's because they have access to words that metaphorically that the weaker players don't. So let's see what these words are. Let's go through the problem. It's white's turn to move, and he notes that black has the opposition, which is already a piece of language. And most people know that, what opposition is, but they don't know the context of it. So, in other words, black is keeping white out, very basically. And if it was black's turn to move, that would be better for white than this position. So that's kind of white's goal, is to flip the turn, because then black will have to give way. But how to do that? Well, let's see. Let's start with most basic things. This is the pawn square. Right. So if black has to stay within the constructs of these squares, if he leaves that pawn square, that means that white's pawn will promote, and I'm sure most of you know what that means. I mean, you know what the pawn square is. So that's one piece of information. So the most obvious application of this pawn square is to note that black is completely banned from the H file. If he ever goes to the H file, white's pawn will promote. And that is not good. So white's plan, once you see that, is pretty clear. White just has to get his king to here. I'm going to get rid of this. And then, actually, I'll make it yellow. And then black won't be able to follow with his king. So the next move that white should consider is king over to e2. But there's one little thing that white has to be careful with, and that is black making a run for it and coming into c3 and coming to take this pawn, right? And it would be so white has to calculate that out. Let's see how a high level player would do that. They would just calculate out the moves and see where that would leave them. They would say, okay, I will play king e2. I'm going to use my mouse instead of selecting the squares. I'll do king e2. Black will play king c3. I'll play pawn to c5. Black will play king takes b3. I'll play pawn c6. Black will play king a2. I'll play pawn c7. I'll play pawn b3, and white will play pawn to c8 queening, and then I'll play pawn to b2. I might have said b2 last time. I meant b3, the last move. So the resulting position is king on a2 for black, pawn on b2 for black, and queen on c8 for white. White's turn to move. Now, a new player would have to continue calculating because it's not over yet. But a high-level player would know well, that's a theoretical win. And I have a video just on that endgame. Um, Queen versus 7th rank pawns is one of the most famous and basic endgames. So white will calculate that and say, I know that that's a. I'm just going to put the position on so that we're not all, some it might be difficult if you're not used to doing this in your head. But, oops, sorry. We'll make a queen and we'll make a pawn. And this position, trust me, it's a win for white. It's a famous position. And white, the high-level player, will stop calculating there and he won't have to continue his thought process. So now white will say, okay, well, he can't go to c3, he'll have to come to e4, and he's going to have to lose the opposition, so we're going this way. How many low-level players are going to play this move, moving his king away and from the action, then moving it away from the action again? I guarantee you that it'd be very unlikely that an amateur or a low-level player would play this, because it just looks bizarre. But it's perfectly logical if you know the rules, and we know that the king is now the edge of this pawn square, so we'll play this way. And of course, black cannot play king h4 because the pawn will run. Well, now black's in a bit of a conundrum. How to continue? Well, let's say he keeps diagonal opposition. Of course, he can't come here to keep opposition because he'll leave the pawn square, so he'll come here. And now we get to this position. Okay, so now white has to think of white's made progress. He's made a step forward. He's one rank higher. But now what to do? Can we play the same idea? King h3? Well, if he plays king h3, he'll have to give way again, right? On f5, and then we'll go up to h4. But the problem now is that now he can come. This diagonal opposition by black now does actually work because this move, which was not available last turn, is available now because this move is within the pawn square of the c4 pawn. So now black will maintain the opposition, and white will not make any progress unless he goes back to this position. Okay, so let me just show what I meant, because maybe that's this is what I mean. Black can just follow white until he concedes that king h3 was a mistake. So the same operation won't work again. So now white has to use language again, so to speak. And white will note that this square is controlled by his pawn. So now we can use the same trick we used before, the opposite direction. If we start running left, black won't be able to keep running left like us, and he'll have to give the opposition away again, like this. And now black again is in Zugzwang because he can't maintain opposition with us. So what to play for black? Let's say he plays this move. Maybe it's a tricky move. It doesn't actually make any difference. King e4 is probably the most accurate move because it maintains opposition, but king d4 is also perfectly reasonable for a win. But anyway, let's say king e4, king here. So it doesn't make much of a difference. And now this is just easy, not difficult at all. And you can see that if white wants, he'll capture this soon, and if not, he can just promote the. It's probably even easier just to promote this pawn. Come up here and promote. So, yeah, it's an easy win. Easy win for white, right? Yeah, but this maneuver is not so easy, right? Look at this. How bizarre. It's running both ways to win. So, I hope this impacts you somehow. It's not enough to just do tactics. You have to know things. You have to. Because in the real game, it's not just you're not just winning material. Sometimes your tactical combinations lead to strategic advantages. Sometimes you have to do a whole combination just to get an abstract advantage. And to know that that's an advantage, you have to have knowledge. And that's the purpose of this video. So thank you.